welcome back to the Mel K Show. You know how important I think it is that we understand that what is going on right now in the United States is really about the world. And as I always say, they're not after the United States, they're after the whole world. And right now, the United States seems to be in the way. But I have a great person today who's been working very, very hard. He is from Germany. And his new book out is incredible, and I'm very, very excited to welcome Dr. Michael Nehls to the show. Thank you for joining me, sir.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, Mel. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Your work is incredible. You've been doing, you've had a very long career so far. So I wanted first and foremost to tell my audience a little bit about your background, and then we'll get in to the current book, The Indoctrinated Mind, and what people really need to know, not just about what is happening to us, but what we can actually do about it. So if you could tell my audience a bit about your background.
Well, I studied medicine in Germany, and but immediately became a postdoc in the United States since I was very interested in basic research. So I did postdoctoral research at the University of California in San Diego for 2 years. Then I came back to Germany and did a PhD in molecular genetics with a focus on immunology. So I have a little understanding, I guess, what's going on in the last 4 years since beginning of 2000. With this virus, and also about genetic engineering, of course, because that's what I did for 20 years. I did a lot of basic research discovering the genetic causes of diseases with several Nobel Prize winners, which I was honored to work with. And I actually was also in the pharma business in a way. I had a basic research company in molecular genetics in Munich, where I had big contracts with the pharma industry to find new targets for disease, for medical treatment of diseases. That was very fruitful, but on the other side, I realized that that is not really the best way for eternal youth. That's actually having a lifestyle that is more in accordance with our natural needs. So I finished my career at that point and started to become a writer. And instead of going deeper and deeper to the molecular details of certain genes, I started to try to comprehend what has been discovered so far and create a picture from all the different individual discoveries, like pixels or puzzle pieces to put them together like a jigsaw piece. And the first disease where I found a great understanding, I guess, how it can be prevented is Alzheimer's. So one of my first books was on Alzheimer's disease. I published also a paper on this, which is called Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease, and gave me an insight of how our memory works and what is needed to keep it alive for a lifetime. And that's exactly also the basis of my understanding the immunological part with COVID, but also the understanding of how the brain works, particularly our autobiographical memory, and how it is destroyed due to the measures that we have experienced the last 4 years. And that's also the basis, of course, of my book, The Indoctrinated Brain, because it shows what is done to the brain, how it is transformed, and that this indoctrination is more than just a manipulation of our mind. It's actually a change of our being, of our personality, and that's also what we experience in the meanwhile. So I think this book is the quintessence of my life, so to speak.
Yeah, and for everyone. It's interesting, when I was reading through your book, I was shocked because I had a while ago done a show on a NATO document about cognitive warfare. It was called Battle for the Brain, a very terrifying document, if you ask me. And I'm looking through it, and then I'm looking at what you were writing, and they're talking a lot, and it sounds kind of like science fiction, but they're talking about using the human mind as a weapon, basically, breaking it down. And this NATO document went out to all the militaries, and this is very high-level cognitive warfare. And they talk a lot about it in this document and in the other work that they've put out right for the public about the biometrics and all this stuff having to do with brain science and how they're using neurology and and they're saying that they're using all these different pathways to, like you said, not change what people think, but change how they think. And I'm thinking this is a military document on manipulating the human brain on a military scale. And that's when I first thought, oh, this makes a lot more sense what we've gone through. So when COVID came and it came around, at what point did you realize that this was kind of a war on our minds more as much as anything else?
Well, the first two books I wrote on COVID were actually a strategy to prevent the severe cause of the disease, because it was very clear from my immunological background that nobody should die on COVID, because the reason people die is what we call a cytokine storm. So it's an overwhelming reaction of the immune system, which is based on a dysregulation of the immune system, mainly due to simple missing micronutrients, foremost vitamin D. And it was clear, very clear from the beginning, and particularly after a few months of research that has been done on COVID patients, that if you give patients, if you increase the vitamin D level in the blood very quickly, nobody dies of the disease. So, but what I realized is that there was a warfare almost against any proposal that vitamin D should be given to the public.
There was.
And so I realized that it's not about human health, it's about something else. And what I also realized in the first year, when we had all these lockdowns and all these kind of unhuman measurements, they were completely in line with all the measures that I was talking against the years before, when we wanted to inhibit Alzheimer's development. Alzheimer's is a disease which stems from an unnatural lifestyle, and it became extremely unnatural in 2020. So I predicted in a book at the time that we will see an increase in Alzheimer's disease, but also a major increase in depression.
Right.
And as it was in 2019, the World Health Organization told us that we have the highest level of depression worldwide. It's the #1 disease. And a year later, due to the measures, the disease tripled in the incidence rates in America. There's publication on that.
Right.
So I realized the brain itself, and particularly the region which is responsible for developing depression, developing Alzheimer's, our autobiographical memory, is actually the center of the attack. And if I look at what we as humans are, we have to, of course, we want to live, we want to have children, and that is essentially the imperative of evolution. If our predecessors had not followed this imperative, the two of us wouldn't sit here.
Right.
We would just not
exactly.
be here.
Right.
And so in order to grow up, we have defense mechanisms. We have the bodily immune system, which doesn't work well if, for example, vitamin D is missing. Mm-hmm. It needs it for its regulation. But on the other side, we have also a mental immune system, which allows us not to fight against microorganisms primarily, but against macroorganisms. Mostly human beings. They are the most dangerous enemies we have.
Right.
So in order to react to threats from outside properly, we have to use our memory, our ability to think, our interest in understanding what's going on. That means we have to be curious. And all these these ideas of being curious, being resilient, psychologically resilient, being interested in learning and understanding, and being able to go back to previous experiences and compare what's going on with our previous life, so that we react the best way we can. All these functions, which I summarize as our mental immune system, reside functionally in the so-called hippocampus. That's the center of our autobiographical memory, and also the place where depression takes place or Alzheimer's develops. And so I realized very quickly that 2020 that the hippocampus is under attack. And that we have this increased depression rate, so we will have what we experience already. We have a major increase in Alzheimer's diseases. At least in Germany, we see that, and with the numbers, it's in 30% increase in 1 year. So it's dramatic.
Yeah.
And this cannot be explained by age, which is usually said to be the cause, but it isn't, which I show in my paper, Unified Theory of Alzheimer's Disease. It's actually the lifestyle, and the lifestyle has changed dramatically in 2020. Yes. And then came this what they call the vaccination program, which I call the spiking program. And here it's very interesting. We know from Alzheimer's research that infections, when they are long-lasting, impede the autobiographical memory. They actually harm the autobiographical memory, also a risk factor for Alzheimer's. And already with SARS-CoV-1 in 2002, 2003, papers were published later on, 2006, 2007, that the spike protein of SARS-CoV-1 can initiate something we call neuroinflammation, and leads to a release of certain cytokines, the same ones actually which we see in the cytokine storm that leads to the bodily harm. And these cytokines, I give just a few names like interleukin-1, interleukin-6, or TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha. These cytokines are inhibitors of the function of the autobiographical memory. The strongest inhibitors you can imagine. So that was already known in 2006, 2007, based on research on SARS-CoV-1. And it was also known that the reason for this damage to the brain based on SARS-CoV-1 is the reason, or the major culprit, is actually the spike protein. So when I realized by further research that the spike protein in SARS-CoV-2 has been modified by genetically engineering this furin, cleavage site, which was proposed actually by a think tank to the DARPA in 2018.
Right.
I was wondering for several reasons. First of all, the site was introduced to create a bioweapon, and if you read the text, it's mainly speaks about higher infection rates. But what it doesn't speak about, but is very obvious now, and it became obvious to me very early on, is that after the cleavage by furin, which is like a scissor, we have a molecular scissor we have in our body cells. Mm-hmm. So if the virus or the spike mRNA is in the cells, and the spike protein is produced and has this furin cleavage site, then the S1 subunit is released. Right. And this S1 subunit can enter the brain via the blood-brain barrier very easily. And it can stay there. And now we have
so many people were saying this. I remember people saying this, probably you included, right in the beginning. I remember Mike Adams, I think you were on his show too, and other people, and they were just shutting it down. And they kept saying that the blood-brain barrier, and it was just, I remember, but you would hear it and then it would be gone. And people kept saying, something is wrong here. And I don't think people were putting it together quite as much as you just said, even right there, that this was an attack on our brains, like on a massive scale. Go ahead.
If you want to conquer the world, if you want to make the people, easy to rule, then you have to shut down their mental immune system. And the mental immune system is basically working in the autobiographical memory. All the functions are there that are required for mental defense. Right. And the key is that the autobiographical memory has a specific function or a specific ability. It can create new cells the whole life. And this creation of new cells is the key for the understanding for the autobiographical memory. And we call this production, which is unique to the brain in this particular area, we call this production the adult, because it still happens in the adult life. Everything else, all other neurogenesis, or the production of new nerve cells in the brain, shuts down when we are grown up. But
Right.
the hippocampus, the autobiographical memory center, needs to continue in productive neurogenesis in order to be resilient, to be curious, to be able to think. All these abilities are essentially based on this what we call adult hippocampal neurogenesis. So adult hippocampal neurogenesis is shut down when the spike protein is activating the immune cells in the brain, and they release interleukin-1 and all the other cytokines, because they are shutting down neurogenesis in the hippocampus, and it has traumatic effects not only on our resilience to our mental immune system. It has, and that's what's really shocking, on which I show in my book. It leads to a vulnerability that to a change in our personality, the traumatic change in our personality.
Yeah. I mean,
And I can
it's
explain it
incredible.
maybe in a few words, because it's really traumatic, and one has to understand how actually the hippocampus works to understand it, what I'm talking about. So every time we talk, like we talk now,
Yeah.
We are able to remember instantaneously and long term what we discussed. I mean, if I think about what I said a few sentences ago, I know it's not my short-term memory; it's my long-term memory already. Short-term memories are only brain circuits in the brain; they don't remember anything. But the long-term memory, that is, that we can go back a minute, 2 minutes, half an hour, 10 years back to thoughts we had, and can remember them. And this unique function, a thought just instantaneously remembered for a long time, that's only the only piece or the only part of the brain that's able to do that is the hippocampus.
Wow. And let me ask you real quick, because so you said it before that Alzheimer's, and I remember your paper came. I remember seeing you, and your paper came out, and there was talk about Alzheimer's, and then of course it got shut down immediately. You and I are both very censored, as is anyone that was asking any real questions in the beginning. What you said, that the lifestyle has a lot to do with Alzheimer's. What lifestyle is that is negative, that also kind of was replicated during the measures taken after COVID?
Mm-hmm. So there is, in my book, there is a formula against indoctrination, but essentially it's also a formula against Alzheimer's. So everybody who reads the book will also know what he or she has to do to have a life up to old age without the fear of getting Alzheimer's. Right. And this formula has certain elements, and the central element, of course, is that we have purpose in life. So that's the central element of our being, that we have to have a purpose in life, because if you don't have a purpose in life, we don't have eustress. That is healthy stress. We don't have anything to do, and we need this for the new cells in the brain, in the hippocampus, that are daily created, that they have themselves a purpose in life. And if we don't have a sense in life or purpose in life, and we have nothing we experience of which is exciting for us, then these cells have no reason to live, and they actually die. So instead of our hippocampus growing every year by 2, 3, or 4%, it actually shrinks. And so purpose of life is very important. And of course, many people don't have a purpose in life when they grow old, because they retire, and the families are not there, because you lived alone the whole life. And now, of course, the breakdown of the large families that we have still in the last century, maybe, or previous century, the 19th century, this is all gone due to our modern lifestyle. And of course, the measures have changed this dramatically. Suddenly, we were not allowed to visit our grandparents or parents. Yeah, so we have all this unsocial distancing. Yep. And it's another part of my formula. We need other people. Yep. We need to share our thoughts with other people. We have to communicate, because what feeds the hippocampus with new information, which makes the new cells worthwhile living, are usually coming from discussions and talks to other people. And so by shutting down the ability to talk to others, to isolate people, is the worst that can be done to people.
Yeah.
There was actually a publication in New England Journal of Medicine 2 weeks before the COVID pandemic started. It was published in New England Journal of Medicine, and they showed that even if you live in the Antarctic, as a researcher, after 1 year, your hippocampus was shrinking by 2 to 3% because of isolation and a monotonous lifestyle. And they knew if they do that to other people, the shrinking will occur. Instead of growing, shrinking. And that's dramatic because everybody gets closer to a depression and Alzheimer's, because
Wow.
we need these new cells. The new cells that are productively produced, that they survive, are essentially the neuronal correlate of what we call psychological resilience. In the other words, if you shut down the production of these new cells by all these measures, then the resilience drops, and the opposite happens. You are more prone to depression because your psychological resilience is essentially down.
It makes it sound so, I mean, it is nefarious, but it makes it sound so much more nefarious than most people want to accept because, I said before we came on, because you're from Germany, in an area where I did a lot of work on Hannah Arendt all through college, and then I wrote a screenplay about her. And in Origins of Totalitarianism, she even says in that book that the best time for totalitarians to take over society is by using isolation and loneliness. She has a whole section about isolation and loneliness and how it's a weapon. And she wasn't thinking on your level of the hippocampus and all of this stuff, but she was just saying from her point of view that was being a weapon that was used, is that, and it was certainly used during the entire lockdown situation. It's funny, when it started, I know a lot of people who are sober and got sober through AA and other programs where you have meetings and your fellowship with other men keep you healthy and sober, and it's that schedule and showing up and feeling like you're part of a group. And when I saw the lockdowns, I was in Manhattan at the time, so the lockdowns were really harsh. And I said, oh, so they're shutting all the schools, they're shutting all the churches, they're shutting anywhere that people meet in for recovery. I was thinking about friends that were sober, and I said, and they're leaving open the liquor stores. I thought, well, great. Well, you got the 25 million people that go to meetings every day to save their lives and stay sober, just lost that. And I thought that it's going to be suicide, overdose, relapse, like you're saying. And it seemed very clear to me that was going to happen. And like you're saying, now let me ask you, when that happened with the lockdowns and everything, we had a series of videos that came out from Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, and of course Prince Charles, and all kinds of people talking about, again, Build Back Better and all of this. But what I've come to believe about Build Back Better, which kind of goes in line, I think, maybe with your book, is that they have to destroy what is, whatever we think is and is normal and natural, and has been for thousands of years, if not hundreds of years. No longer to these people, especially the great resetters, worked. And that everything had to be redone into this fourth industrial revolution and all of that. So when you're talking about purpose and about interaction and all of that, and then you juxtapose it with what these people were putting out there. I mean, I scoured the World Economic Forum's websites. I connected it to the UN and a bunch of other places, World Health Organization, especially their tactical group that was set up at the World Health Organization with Cass Sunstein and I think Sage in England, on behavioral modification and forcing people to do stuff. A lot of this is about totally removing the human element from everything. And the more you read what they're saying, even through the you will own nothing, universal basic income, what they're doing is taking away purpose of living at all.
Yeah. The problem is, and I compare this to when you install a new operating system in a computer. When you put a new operating system in a computer, you don't want the new one being interfered by the old one. So the first thing what you do is you erase essentially every memory you have and you reformat essentially the computer. And only then you can install the new one and it runs smoothly. So if you want to install essentially a new operating system in society, that and you don't want to have anybody to interfere with. You have to erase memory. You have to erase the previous thought, pretty much like they have done in Brave New World. But there, of course, it's much easier. They didn't have to erase anything. People are already when they are born, decanted from the bottles in the book.
Exactly.
Then you essentially install them with the narratives that you want to have, propagated. But here, of course, we have already a society that has their own, where every individual has its own history, his personality, and his own way to reflect on things. And in the sum of all people, essentially, is the immune system of the society, the sum of all individualities. And now, what do you want to do to get into a situation where everybody only has this new operating system in their brain? Well, the target is really the production of these new cells, which are actually called index neurons in the hippocampus. These index neurons are essentially nerve cells that are produced every night and are essentially like the index to all our memories of all our life. So if you shut down index neuron production, and this is done by the measures in 2020, and as I show in my book, by the spike protein, either coming from infection, but mainly, of course, now through these spiking programs, then you shut down index neuron production. The problem the hippocampus has, if new information comes along that is important, how can you store it without new index neurons? Well, the only way to do it is to override the previous ones. And then actually you have what we call the reformatting of the brain. Do you override the index neurons that maybe memorized what I've experienced as a child when I blew out the birthday candle, or what I experienced all my life, all my life experience, which makes up my personality, are stored in these individual index neurons. And if I shut down index neuron production, which is done perfectly now, either through the measurements, but now, of course, through this recurring spiking, where actually the failure to provide immune protection is an advantage from the point of view of this overriding, idea, because it doesn't work very well. So we have to repeat it every half year or every year at least. But we know that this is essentially the time frame the spike protein persists in the brain. So we have a continuous spike presence by this repeated spiking. And the consequence is all these narratives we hear, is all this fear mongering, which, because the hippocampus learns only if there's a strong emotion involved with what he has to learn. Everyday routine, the hippocampus ignores. The hippocampus only learns when what we experience, what we think, comes with an emotion. Now, we have no index neurons available for new thoughts, for new emotional content. But of course, all these narratives, the war on this, the war on that, all these dangerous global wars against climate, against whatever, come, of course, with lots of emotions. So they are installed in the hippocampus. But of course, every installation of every thought based on this fear mongering destroys a piece of our personal history in the brain.
I don't know about you, but I feel a lot better being prepared for whatever's coming. Every day I hear something new. Something's coming from the CDC. Something's coming from the FDA. Who's trying to take over our healthcare system. All this craziness. And what I know is that one man really changed my life, how I look at everything that's happening to me health-wise, and that was Dr. Zelenko. He was a good friend of mine, a good friend of the show, and he came up with the most amazing product. Z-Stack has been a game changer for us. We have not been sick since we've been on it. We take it regularly. If we feel like we're coming down with something, we'll double up. But he has all new products over at the website. God rest his soul. He did not leave us unprepared, and that is very important for you to prepare. So he's got Z-Shield. He's got a Kids Z-Stack, which is awesome. He's got Z-Flu, Z-Detox. He's got all kinds of things. He always said to me, your immune system must be clean, resilient, and resistant. This matters the most. And what I can say on top of that is that he supported me. He supported free speech. He supported medical freedom. He supported personal liberty, and everything that I believe in, he believed in. He inspired me to be myself, to speak up, to speak out. And what matters is that you are feeling healthy, whole, clean, clear, focused, and that your immune system is protected from anything that comes our way. And Z-Stack is the best way to do that. Please stock up on Z-Stack. Go to themelkshow.com, go to our partners page, goes down to Z-Stack. That also supports the show. When you buy from our partners, these great people, especially Dr. Zelenko, who's dear to me, you are supporting the show and keeping us going. And I know that truth, freedom, and the First Amendment matter to you. They mattered to him. They mattered to me.